Greetings adventurers, this is Lauren, your guild advisor, and I apologize that this has taken a bit longer than I expected, but this is the spoiler discussion video for DanMachi Volume 14, and there's a lot of stuff to go over, and as I said before, this is the spoiler discussion video, so if you haven't completed reading the novel yet, I highly suggest you do that before watching this video, because it deserves to be read without knowing anything that happens in the actual novel itself. It's definitely quite the ride. But for those of you that have read the novel already, I have a lot of things to discuss about it, a lot of things that I like. I'm pretty positive overall about the novel. It is my favorite installment so far, so not too many negative things to say about it, but I'm probably going to go over the novel with the events in chronological order. That's a bit easier to make way and discuss all the points. I don't know how long this video is going to be because it is the longest novel in the series, but we'll just see how it goes. So, without further ado, let's get started with my thoughts on Volume 14. Now, one of the things this novel opens up with is a small scene at the Benevolent Mistress, the pub that Ryu, Chloe, Anya, Lunar, and Seer all work at. And they're discussing all this stuff about Ryu, about her disappearing suddenly, and then she just left a letter and she wouldn't normally do something like that. And Seer goes up and leaves out the back door to go to somewhere. We don't know where that is in this novel itself, but Seer is a very insightful person. We see it in Familiar Chronicle episode Ryu. So I'm wondering where she went to. We know she has ties with Freya Familia, so I'm wondering if that's where she actually went to discuss about Ryu's disappearance. But she comes back at the very end of this volume, and we still don't know what exactly Seer was doing when she did leave that pub, because I have a suspicion that Seer had an idea of where Ryu would be, so there is no point to her going out and searching for Ryu because she probably has some kind of clue as to where Ryu might be, and she can't go into the dungeon herself, so I think she went to consult someone in Freya Familia, but we don't know what all that is about. Maybe we will in the future. But we do get that scene where Hestia comes into the pub and asks the waitresses, what are your levels? And they're all level 4, so they are ready to go and go into that part of the dungeon, despite Chloe and Rinoa not really knowing what the dungeon is all about. We know that Anya used to be in Freya Familia and she's level 4, and you see some of that experience later on in this novel. And we know that they also get Suzuki, the level 5 captain of Hephaestus Familia, to go down into that group. So you have the level 5 Suzuki as well as the 3 level 4s, Chloe, Anya, and Lunar, all going down into the dungeon to look for the Hestia Familia Expedition group. And we do get small snippets of them going down. We get to see some fun banter between all of them. It's just unfortunate we didn't get too much more than that. I really like to see more about Anya and her past with Freya Familia, how all that went down. Why did her and Mamma Mia leave Freya Familia? What is Anya's history with Alan? Why does Alan appear to pretty much hate Anya in other material? There was a Christmas event in Damamo in 2018, and this actually launched in the game close to the time of the Japanese release of Volume 14. So it was very coincidental that in the game event, that Anya, Chloe, and Lunar all went down into the dungeon during the same time that they would all go down into the dungeon in Volume 14. And I think that's something I discussed in the Volume 13 spoiler discussion video, where I was thinking of who is left to help support Hestia Familia with all the other members already down in the dungeon. And one thing that came to mind was Chloe, Lunar, and Anya, because they were heavily hinted at in the Damamo event, and they are something that was hinted at because they were mentioned in a scene at the pub. I'm like, I know they're all level 4, so maybe Omori is foreshadowing them going on to the dungeon. Sure enough, here they are. And I was wondering if they would actually go and help with the Amphisbaena fight. They did not, which is actually surprising to me, but it just makes it so much better for the rest of Hestia Familia without Belle to see them accomplish something so difficult on their own. But it was really cool to see all those members of Hestia Familia, along with their allies, be able to defeat the Amphisbaena of the water capital all by themselves. And Omori Sensei does a really good job highlighting all the different characters and what they're doing, how they're feeling throughout this fight. Like I said in the review video, this fight is about 80 pages in total. There are some snippets here and there about Suzuki and the rescue team, but the bulk of that is the Amethyst Banana fight, and I think he did a great job describing what everyone's role was in that fight. I really liked Welf's role in this fight. Like, before the fight even starts, they're all, like, in despair. They're like, how are we going to get through this? And then, like Cassandra's prophecy says, like, consecrate the flame. And the flame during this fight is, like, Welf's spirit, like, saying, we can do this. Like, as a smith brings fire to the forge, Welf is bringing that fire inside everyone's hearts so they can accomplish something without Bell. And there are a lot of small character moments in that fight that I would like to highlight. There's that really cool moment when Mikoto is down in the water. They don't know what's up with her, and they just reveal that she's been casting her gravity spell this entire time. And she puts that spell above the Amethyst Bana, and that makes it get clamped to the ground. And Oka takes advantage of the opportunity and actually uses the momentum of the gravity to make him to make his axe even more powerful when he swings it downward, and it takes off one of the heads of the monster, and that was a really cool scene. There's also Haruhime, and Haruhime is an MVP. Without her level boosting skills, they would not be able to make it out of this. So clearly she's a very valuable asset. Just that level boosting, it just makes it so much easier for them to take on challenges they wouldn't be able to otherwise. Hopefully she does get some offensive capabilities later on, and I think that's what Welf's magic swords will be able to do for her later down the series. But she's able to take the Goliath robe, cover herself in it, and give that last level boost to Aisha so she can deal the finishing blow to the Monster Rex. But before all that happened, you also had Daphne revealing some of her magic, being able to buff her own speed. And she does a lot for both Cassandra and Lily in this as well. Like, she's kind of Daphne has a lot of involvement throughout this fight, actually, because she actually gets Mikoto out of a bind, pushes her out of the way of something. She gives a pep talk to Cassandra, who just, like, in despair this entire time because she thinks, like, a lot of this is her fault, like she couldn't change the prophecy. But she does get Cassandra in line and makes her start healing people in the party, and that's very important. And she also gives a small pep talk to Lily, because she has been, since Volume 12, been coaching Lily on how to lead the Familia, and Daphne recognizes that she can't help lead during the fight because she has to actually help fight the Amethyst Bana. So Lily has to be the one to look at the overall picture, what's happening in the fights, and give people those roles and assign them on what to do. And Lily's able to do just that throughout this fight, and it's really cool seeing Lily develop as this tactical leader of the Familia, not unlike Finn. So again, it's really cool seeing all these individual members of the crew have their own time in the light to shine in their actions, and then later on, after the fight ends, we see Welf loot that adamantite, and the madman is like, guys, I'm gonna be making a weapon right here, right now. Like, all right, man, you go do that, we'll defend you, I guess. And I don't know why, but my eyes like started watering as I was reading what Welf is going through. Like, this is something he's always been aspiring to do, like make a weapon that would equal, if not surpass, Hephaestus, and he's getting there. He's getting to that point. He's finally able to make a magic sword that doesn't break, and that's just something that will substantially increase the firepower of Hestia Familia. Like, I've been saying a lot that because of Bell's ability to get XP so fast and level up so quickly, like, he's very far ahead of everyone else in the Familia. So he's up there being level 4, and at this rate he could be level 5 by what he's been going throughout this entire arc. But everyone else is just staying at their levels. So between Haruhime's level boosting and then Welf's new ability to make these unbreakable magic swords that depend on the magic of the users, we might be able to see Hestia Familia be more balanced. And there also is that issue of me really wanting Ryu to join Hestia Familia itself, but I'll discuss that later on in the video. But Welf is finally able to make that magic sword, and it's really cool to see that scene and then the unveiling of what it does. And then Suzuki comes down and she's like, I know what you did. You finally did it, my boy. Welcome to the world. Welcome to the hell of Smiths. But then besides Suzuki's group, we finally get to see the other allies that'll be helping get to Bell and Ryu, and that is part of the Xenos. It's just like half of them from the group that is helping infiltrate Gnosis along with Loki Familia. Interested to see what Loki Familia is doing down there. We'll probably get that as sort of Retoria Volume 11. But it's really cool to see some of the Xenos, especially Wine, be involved with the rescue of Bell and Ryu. Now, again, the novel is divided into 2 parts. Basically, this whole Monster Rex fights, and then Bell and Ryu. We don't really get the Xenos and the rest of the Hestia expedition crew going down through the floors on their way to rescue Bell and Ryu, but I think that just adds to the tension at the very end of the novel, because if you did just see that constant progression of Hestia Familia, the Xenos, and Subiki's group, and then that leading up to the final fight against the Juggernaut, there wouldn't be as much tension during that, because like, oh, we know that they're a floor away from rescuing them. So I think it's a good idea. It was a good choice not to just go back and forth between Bell and Ryu and then their progress from floor 27 down on the side of the Hestia Familia and allies, because that would just break the tension that Bell and Ryu are feeling. And that the second big half of that book about Ryu and Bell is just so tense. It's so horrifying because they're down there on floor 37 alone, all beat up, and I think it said they were down there for like almost 3 days. Like, that's crazy because they barely had chances to rest. Like, we saw them have like that, you get 5 minutes, you get 5 minutes. Okay, now we got to keep going and keep fighting all these monsters as they're trying to navigate and get to the main road on floor 37 so they can actually go back up. And with floor 37, the first of the deep floors, there's just so much going on there. Like, Omori sensei gives a lot of descriptions. Like, there's a ton of monsters down there. There's a lot of cool geography, like the Colosseum, the fact that there's like multiple walls, like layers of walls that make up floor 37, and that it's actually bigger than the city of Arario. Like, it's crazy. This is just one floor, like, and you know that Loki Familia has been regularly passing through this all the time, because their limits right now is floor 59. I believe they've beat that spirit monster at the very end, and they could go into level 60 technically, but they had to go back up after that crazy fight in Sartoratoria. But that just gets a perspective like how huge the dungeon is. Like, they're on floor 37 and it's as big as Arario right now. But I really appreciate the tone. Like, it just feels so desperate of a situation for Ryu and Bell as they're navigating through floor 37, fighting their way through monsters. And they share so many great moments together with Bell and Ryu. And the one thing I really appreciate that this book finally gave us is just more scenes with Estrella Familia, like the actual individual Familia members. Besides Elise, we got to learn about Kaguya, we got to learn about Lyra, all these names of different Estrella Familia members, and I just really wish they had a volume all to themselves. I know I said this in the review video. That's what I initially thought Familia Chronicle episode Ryu would be. Who knows if Omori Sensei is ever planning to do something about Estrella Familia besides what we've got in this volume, but I wouldn't be opposed to it. And with these Estrella Familia scenes, you can see a lot of where Ryu draws her expertise and knowledge from. Like with Kaguya, you get to see that's where she learned her quick draw technique that you see displayed in this novel. And I'm always a sucker for like those quick draw techniques in anything where they unsheath the sword, make a quick slash, and put it back in. Like, I'm always a sucker for that stuff. We also get a mention of Lyra, the Prum, and she teaches Ryu about using everything at your disposal, just in using your knowledge and tactics. And that's where we see Ryu use that knowledge and make that cloak from the skull sheep to disguise her and Bell as they're trying to go across the Colosseum and avoid the monsters. We also learned that the Estrella Familia home was called Stardust Garden, and we also get that like small tidbit that Shakti's sister, Shakti, the leader of Ganesha Familia, her sister Adi, died against the efforts against the evils, and that's something I didn't expect to pop up, but that's just some small world building that we're seeing throughout this novel. And it's a huge novel, and I'm surprised to see Omori Sensei include so much detail, including that in here. And then we see that cute thing that Ryu does with Bell's pinky, where she holds on to it with her pointer finger and thumb, and that was something she took from Elise. And all this stuff from Elise, Kaguya, Lyra, and the other Estrella Familia members are all knowledge that Ryu is taking in, and she's teaching Bell all this. And even Bell like says, as Ryu is critiquing Bell and giving him advice, Ryu's words are like magic. You're like my teacher, aren't you? And that just makes me really happy to see Bell and Ryu gel together so well throughout this novel. Like, they only have each other to depend on, and they really have their backs throughout the whole of this second half of this volume. And we also get a lot of talk about justice and ideals, and then Elise's conversation with Ryu. Like, we need to pursue ideals because they're filled with happiness. That's why it's meaningful. And if someone does fulfill them, those are the people we call heroes. And then whenever we like get that mention of heroes, we get to see like Bell involved in the novel. And it's so cool that Bell is indeed becoming this hero figure to Ryu here. And Bell is just so crazy throughout this entire volume. Like, I call him like an absolute madman, because you see that he got poisoned by one of those spines, and what does he do? We all think that he's in a really bad situation. Like, how are they going to get out of this one? Because Bell just got poisoned, and if they don't get like some type of antidote, he's done for. Bell takes Hakugen, the weapon made from a unicorn horn, and it's like, well, it's made from unicorn horn, it should work, right? And he sticks it through his wound, and it actually ends up getting the poison. And it doesn't feel overly convenient, because we know unicorn horns have healing properties, so it's not too out there that Bell would be able to do that. But not only that, Surgeon Bell also closes one of his wounds with firebolt against the Juggernaut towards the end of the novel. I'm like, Bell is just, he's crazy. He's like harming himself, but he's harming himself to like take care of his body. And it's a really funny thing to say, take care of his body, because it's described like his arm that's just wrapped up in that Goliath scarf. He's using it as a shield to block enemy blows. And it's just described like there's like this sloshing sound whenever Bell moves his arm around, and he almost lost his arm in this novel again because he's been depending on it for defense. And like towards the end of the novel, you hear that they practically rebuilt his arm. So Bell is pretty crazy throughout this novel, but it's commendable. This is what it takes to be a hero, I suppose. Then you have that scene, and oh my gosh, it just made me so sad, because you knew this entire time, like, Ryu's teaching Bell all this stuff because she's preparing for when she thinks she'll have to sacrifice herself to save Bell. So she's teaching everything she knows about this for, making sure he has the knowledge to get out of here in the case that she would have to sacrifice herself. And then when they get spotted at the Coliseum, like, that's when Ryu decides to, like, when she started casting that spell, like, I knew that was going to be directed at Bell to push him away. And now it's just so depressing. And seeing her destroy the bridge, and then like, she says she doesn't want to die, so she'll fight to her last breath, but it's kind of hopeless in the Coliseum when they just infinitely respawn the monsters there. And it's just crazy to think that the Coliseum, like, they mentioned that it wasn't always there. It appeared about 30 years ago, so not only are like the monsters and Omori's work here like constantly evolving, like we see that with the Moss Huge, you see that with the Juggernaut, as he's describing like the instincts, the emotions that the Juggernaut's feeling, because it's kind of breaking free from the will of the dungeon because of that collar that Jura put on him. Like, Jura couldn't completely control the Juggernaut, but that collar is responsible for the Juggernaut kind of getting a will of its own, and that desire to find Bell, his prey, the prey that escaped him, and ultimately try to kill Bell for good this time. But now we hear that even the dungeon is evolving itself, so it'll be really interesting to see where Omori Sensei takes that. Like, is the dungeon going to continually evolve in unexpected ways? Like, throughout this entire arc, starting in Volume 12, the dungeons is just throwing irregular after irregular at the Hestia Familia and crew, and they are coming out of it struggling, but they are coming out of it alive. But back to Bell, like, we see that he was experimenting in Volume 12 with his Argonaut ability, being able to charge his Hestian knife with a firebolt. And now we see that he's charging one of those Inferno stones that Ryu gave Bell, and he gives it a full charge, charges straight to where Ryu is, to surprise everybody, like, what are you doing here? I'm trying to save you. That's also around the time where Omori Sensei has Elise repeat the words hero, and that's when Bell comes, and he throws the Inferno stone, grabbing a hold of Ryu, and then explodes it with firebolt, and the entire Coliseum just goes down under. And then that's when Bell and Ryu end up in that path that no one's been to before, because who would be crazy enough to go to the Coliseum where monsters respawn infinitely and then blow it up? Who would think to do that? But that's when Bell and Ryu end up in that long pathway towards the safe spot, where they face one more monster before getting into there. I think it was called a barbarian. And Bell has to like play dead, and that like really scares Ryu, because Bell like has no stamina whatsoever left in this being, after everything they've been through so far throughout this crazy endeavor in the dungeon. And Bell waits for the last moment and then defeats the monster, and then they do make their way to that save point. And some people may think that save point with the spring is very convenient, but I believed it. I bought into it because it just makes sense. They had to go through a lot to even get there. Like I said, Coliseum appeared about 30 years ago. Who would ever think to actually destroy the thing and then find a path? But they do make it to that save point, and I do think it was necessary to give Bell and Ryu a rest, because there's no way in their condition that they could fight the Juggernaut at the end of this volume without some actual extended rest period. And we got a lot out of that rest period here, because a lot of intimate Bell and Ryu moments happening during this time. This is when Ryu opens up to Bell, and she tells Bell that she blames herself for the stuff that happened with Estrella Familia, and that's when Bell tells her, well, it sounds like they sacrificed everything to try and save you, so don't squander the life that they're giving you. And how Ryu's saying that she's not just, she doesn't pursue justice. And then Bell, like, counters that again, like, you are just, Ryu. Like, you give us so much, like, all the stuff you've helped us through, the fight against the Goliath on floor 18, the war game, helping them throughout the Xenos arc. All the stuff that Ryu has done has helped Bell and crew, and if that's not just, then what is justice? And then Bell has that quote I wrote down, like, I won't let anyone deny your worth, not even you. And like, Ryu can't even counter to that, like, wow, Bell's really grown up ever since the Xenos arc. Like, he's being very forceful, being very aggressive, as he's trying to assure Ryu that she is a just person, that she is worth trying to save. And then more Bell and Ryu shipping lines, I will never let you go. And then that's when we get Ryu's like, well, I'm kind of feeling cold, I don't know why, but let's share the body heat. So there's Bell and Ryu together, with Bell practically hugging Ryu when they're both naked, trying to exchange body heat. And then we see Bell, like, spurt out his best innocent playboy lines, like, you're so slender and soft, it makes you realize you're a woman. Like, Bell, what are you saying right now? What are you doing? Then Omori Sensei even writes the line, they were like lovers exchanging pillow talk. Like, Omori Sensei, I had to, like, put the book down and be like, Omori Sensei, you got to stop this. The Bell and Ryu shipper in me is just dying right now. It's screaming out. And then we get to the final encounter with the Juggernaut after Ryu and Bell are all rested as much as they can be. So they make their way out, and then we see that the Juggernaut is very grotesque in the description of its new arm that it grew and able to combat Bell. And it's just made of all these monsters it's been fighting and consuming throughout this novel. And its description is just terrifying. Like, you hear that it's like falling apart, it's like creaking and scratching because it's just made up of all these monsters. And then it's also remade its tail. Like, oh my gosh. If this is ever animated, I'm really wondering to see what it looks like, because we don't really get an illustration of the Juggernaut in this new chimera-like body. And there are also a lot of bittersweet and almost hopeless moments at the end of this novel as well, because they fight the Juggernaut for a little bit, encounter it for a tiny bit, and then they try to make their way and run towards a hallway that the Juggernaut can't get into, but they know they do have to fight it eventually to get back onto the main road. And then that's when Bell and Ryu, like, they constantly lie to each other, and they know the other is lying to like falsely find comfort in each other's words. And it's just like really, like, depressing to read all that. We have Bell comforting Ryu, like, telling her that everything's gonna be okay, they're gonna make it out alive. And then Ryu, like, asks Bell to hold him until she falls asleep. And also, when Bell is holding Ryu during that moment, it quotes, right now, for this one brief moment, Bell and Ryu were tied more closely together than anyone in the world. And Bell and Ryu shipper in me is screaming at that point again. And then Bell goes out there to face Juggernaut on his own. And that's when I was very worried that Omori Sensei would just have Bell, like, defeat Juggernaut by himself, and that would have made me very disappointed, because I thought that defeating Juggernaut, Ryu defeating Juggernaut, is something that just needed to happen to get Ryu over her past, and so she can move on from that. So I'm very glad that he actually had Ryu go out there and deal the finishing blow herself. And first she has that, like, dreamlike sequence where Estrella Familia from the grave is, like, there, and she's trying to reach out to them, like, maybe it's okay if I die now. But then something's just holding her back, and that's just hope, justice, and Bell. We see Ryu get to the fight with Bell and Juggernaut, and she says, Bell, I can't be the elf of the lake, because we see earlier Bell reference one of the stories he's read about a knight guarding an elf. And then Ryu basically says, I don't want to be that elf just standing and being stagnant. I want to be fighting alongside you. And we just get that just beautiful moment where Ryu they make that plan to this final attack where Belle is basically the bait to break open the shell, and Ryu is charging up the Luminous Wind, her final attack, and then when it seems like she missed everything, and the Juggernaut like jumps up to avoid it, like you see Ryu say, like, I knew that this might happen, like I know your speed more than anyone else in the dungeon. And she reserves 10 orbs, and those 10 orbs represent the Estrella Familia members that died, and I think it was just a beautiful and poetic thing to do. Like, maybe it's a little cheesy, but I loved it. I loved it so much. And then you just get that crazy sequence where she's shouting out the names of her individual Familia members, and she's shooting out the orbs, and she's shooting them into herself to propel her through the air. It's a very Belle-esque move, to be honest, like using your own magic against yourself to accomplish something, and Ryu's doing that, and she does that final thing with Elise, and then like almost punching through the Juggernaut and shattering it into a billion pieces. And then you just... we get more of those bittersweet moments where it's like Belle and Ryu conquer the Juggernauts, and then it's like they're just both on the ground within hand's reach, Ryu reaching her hand out to Belle, and they're just like, they're in the ground, completely unable to do anything. And they just have like a super bittersweet conversation, like, yeah, we're gonna make it out alive, and you can tell that they're pretty much thinking that they're gonna die, because they're just down there stranded, no more stamina left in their body. And that's, of course, when we get the Hestia Familia Expedition crew and allies getting to rescue them. And again, like I said, if we had that constant progression and seeing what Hestia Familia was doing, like going down through the floors, there wouldn't be as much tension during that part of the novel, because like, oh, we know they're going to get rescued. But here it just seems super dire, because they're over there like talking to each other like everything's going to be all right, but in the back of their minds they know it's not. So for a brief moment it was super depressing, but they did get rescued. And then that's when we get into Ryu waking up in the clinic, and she, with no regard for what she's wearing, she makes her way to Belle. And everyone there is like, Ryu, you're not wearing anything. And then that's when that strap falls down. And then we get to see, well, we don't get to see, Belle gets to see Ryu's bareness. And it's just like one of those silly romantic comedy scenes that I thought was kind of funny. It probably didn't have too much of a place here, but I understand the kind of story and target audience this series has, so I get why that's there. But we do get a more intimate moment between Belle and Ryu, because it even says, like, I appreciated this, but it said that the waitress crew and also Hestia Familia decided to give Ryu and Belle some space so they could walk out onto Arario for the first time since getting out of the dungeon together. And it was just a really cool scene, like a really cool closing scene for this arc. And then Ryu is, of course, wearing this beautiful white lace dress that Seer gave her, like, we got to see like the back of it on the illustration, but if this is ever animated, like, oh, I'm really looking forward to seeing if this is ever animated. And hopefully whoever gets to animate it does it justice, because this arc is insane and amazing. But back to Belle and Ryu just walking together for the first time out of the dungeon. Ryu finally tells Belle everything about Estrella Familia. And Estrella told Ryu to forget about justice, because if Ryu was focused on her specific definition of justice, and if her vengeance was against that, then Ryu would probably just end her own life then and there. So Ryu understands that Estrella very much still believes in her, and I'm very interested to see if Ryu will try and like go find Estrella, because that was the thing that made me truly believe that Ryu wouldn't die during this arc, because she needs to have that closure. She needs to finally meet Estrella again, knowing that what she did wasn't in the wrong. And again, with the Belle and Ryu shipping scenes, like you also see throughout this volume that it looks like Ryu will like finally just start calling Belle by his first name exclusively. Like throughout these volumes, we've seen Ryu constantly call Belle like Mr. Cronel or Cronel-san if you were to think of it in the Japanese. And then there are times where she would say Belle, but that's usually like during desperate moments. But now, as she's just having casual conversation, she just started to switch to Belle exclusively. So there's that distance that she's no longer giving herself in Belle. Like she's very much accepting herself and allowing her to actually get close to people now. And then Belle continues to have those killer lines. Your smile is so beautiful right now. It makes me so happy to see you smile like that. And then Ryu is just like, is so embarrassed, like she can't figure out what her feelings are, and she says, I can't look you in the face, and then runs away because she doesn't understand these emotions that she's starting to finally allow herself to feel towards Belle. And I really hope those feelings aren't in vain. I hope we do like see Ryu like confess to Belle at the very least, and then Belle like actually give a proper response, unlike many other shonen type stories, other stories with multiple female characters that are infatuated with the main character, that don't get closure to their feelings. So hopefully that is the case here. But we do see that line, like Ryu's wondering, like, what should I do? Elise, what do I do? And then Ryu gets that response in her head in Elise's voice, don't let him escape. So I'm really hoping that Ryu actually does something with that. I'm really looking forward to the future interactions between Belle and Ryu, based on Ryu's newfound feelings for Belle. So hopefully something comes out of that, because before, I've said this before, but before I was very much envisioning like Belle and Eyes is of course the obvious thing that this is leading up to, but now we really do have some serious competition with Ryu, because even though Hestia likes Belle in that way, we know since Volume 8 that Belle doesn't view her in that light. We know that Lily feels that way about Belle, but Belle really just sees Lily as like a little sister type of thing, even though Lily is actually older than Belle. And then, of course, Ryu is like this mentor, older type, sister type of character to Belle. And we'll see if he actually does ever start to see Ryu in that light. We do have that quote from when Belle and Ryu were embracing each other to try and keep warm, that Belle was seeing Ryu as a woman. So who knows? One thing I really noticed is that we stopped getting Belle's first person point of view towards like page 250. So after that, it was like either Ryu's third person point of view or just a omniscient point of view, third person point of view throughout the entire story. So we never really got like the first person storytelling perspective of Belle through that last part of the novel, like all those intimate scenes between Belle and Ryu. We don't get to see Belle's first person point of view. So it's like making me curious, did the Omori sensei do that on purpose? We don't see how Belle views Ryu at this moment. We'll just have to see how that goes. And as for where the story goes on from here, Belle, Ryu, and the rest of the Familia Expedition crew have gone through quite a lot, and Omori Sensei did say in the afterword that the next volume, volume 15, is going to be a more casual slice of life type of story, which I don't mind that much. I know some people weren't too high in volume 8, but after 2-3 volume arcs of greatness and so much intensity, Hestia, Familia, and crew definitely deserved that volume 15 break, and I don't think Omori is going to waste the opportunity to put in some foreshadowing into future events that will happen in the series. Like, there's a lot of things to discuss, especially with Ryu and Seer, and how they will move on from here. Like, we have the question of, will Welf start making more Welf magic swords? Does he have the material for that? Because he only made his first one from adamantite, which is like one of the rarest metals in the series. So does he need more adamantite to make these weapons, or can he make it out of a lesser material, but maybe the weapons aren't as effective? We'll just have to see how that goes. And we do hear that Ryu's name is, well, not actually cleared, but it's said that when Boris reported what happened to the guild, that basically everyone believes that Gale Wind is officially dead. So it's like Ryu has a clean slate, and almost like she can make a new identity for herself. So maybe she's no longer blacklisted by the guild technically, because she can take up like a new name. But we'll just have to see how that works, because I really wanted to join Hestia Familia, but I believe her Falna is still locked to Estrella Familia. And I don't believe Estrella left it open, because I know both Chloe and Lunar, when they left their respective situations, they were able to get their Falna open and unlocked so they could convert to different Familias. But I don't think that is the case with Ryu, because I doubt that's what Estrella and Ryu were thinking at the time. Like, Ryu was down in the dumps thinking about revenge, and opening up her Falna would only confuse Ryu if Estrella were to do that. And her meeting Estrella, that's something I believe will happen. I just don't know if that means Estrella coming back into Terraria, Ryu going outside to meet her. But I do think that she will get her status updated at the very least, and it's most definitely enough to be level 5. Like, she's been stopped at level 4 for 5 years, and she's been participating in all these fights, and especially with her getting the bulk of the Exilia during the Black Goliath fight, helping out the fights against Asterios, and then here doing the final blow on the Juggernaut. There is no way she's not eligible to be level 5 at this point. It's just a matter of her finding Estrella and getting her status updated, and also potentially getting her Fauna unlocked to be able to join Hestia Familia. I don't know if she would just like join Hestia Familia and live in the same mannerism. I almost feel like she'd be a reserve member but still work at the pub. But we know that Migito actually looks up to Ryu from Volume 5 because of her concurrent casting repertoire. So it'd be really cool to see Ryu become this mentor-like figure, this person filled with experience to help teach Hestia Familia, because they can't always just take all these allies on loan. They gotta have someone of their own to help them through all these challenges and develop as characters. And having Ryu in the party as well would just balance out the levels substantially, because right now it's like Bell level 4 and everybody else that's level 2 and below. So having Ryu would round out that party. It would give him an exclusive healer, because even though Cassandra's party allies, they may not always have access to Cassandra, so Ryu having the healing capability and the leadership ability would really help them a lot and bring balance to that crew. And Ryu is also due for a makeover, because her Alves Lumina, her wooden sword, was destroyed in Volume 13. We got a lot of creative liberty of being done with her illustrations throughout this novel, because on the cover art you see Alves Lumina just unharmed, and then in another color illustration you see like 2 Alves Luminas for some reason. I don't know what Yasuda Sensei's doing with that. But right now she has no main weapon. She has her 2 short swords, but she has no main weapon, so I'm wondering if Wealth might make her something, like a Wealth magic sword? Who knows? She needs a new weapon and also like a new garb, because if she is throwing away that Galewind moniker, she can't dress up like Galewind anymore. And maybe she'll get an update to her character design so she's not wearing bloomers anymore. Like, I never thought the bloomers fit her character at all, because she is an elf. She is quite modest, so having her wear bloomers doesn't make any sense. Every other artist that has drawn Ryu besides Yasuda Sensei has given her actual shorts, so that's what I'm looking forward to see, Ryu wearing shorts. But between Ryu potentially joining the Familia as a permanent ally, and then Wealth and his magic swords, and then balancing the party with the magic swords and Ryu, it'll be interesting to see how Hestia Familia tackles on the dungeon from now on, because we've seen Bell make it out alive out of floor 37, though I doubt they'll be going that deep again for quite some time. But it's very interesting to see where the story is going to go from here. Are we going to continue getting more adventures in the dungeon? Is something else going to come into the fray, like something with C or something with Freya Familia? We'll just have to see what happens. Volume 15, Yen Press just announced that you're doing it. Give us a date, because it's really it's very concerning that they didn't even date a possible release day for Volume 15. I understand why they wouldn't, because of this 9-month wait for Volume 14, but just not even seeing a date is very worrisome. Now let's talk about the afterword a bit. Here I was always wondering like what Omori Sensei drew his inspiration for all these like fights that happen in the series, because they're always incredibly well written. You always know where characters are positioned. You feel the emotions from both sides of the conflict, even though monsters normally don't have emotions, but he does get in desires with the Moss Huge and then the Juggernaut later on in this novel. So you always wonder like how he gets the inspiration to write these fights, and he was wondering how to write the floor boss fight, and someone like have you seen Monster Hunter? And that's always something that popped into my mind, like I wonder if he plays Monster Hunter to figure out how to position these fights and get inspiration for them. So that was really funny to see. And there is this weird, for a long time, if you did a Google search for Fujino Omori, it would say that he was like over 60 years old. And I never believed that, because there was an interview that he went to university and he was inspired to start writing DanMachi after reading the SAO, Sword Art Online web novel, and I think that started being published in like 2002. So I knew Omori Sensei couldn't be 60 years old if he was in university reading Sword Art Online when it was originally a web novel. So there's no way that's a thing. And we finally see, it says when the book came out in 2018, he was under 30. So he's actually very close to my age. I'm 25, and seeing that Omori Sensei is still quite young makes me really happy, because like he's so young and he's able to make a series that's so beloved, and he has many years to go in his life to keep on writing, even beyond DanMachi. And one surprising thing he said in the afterword was that he was tempted to end the series with Ryu's story. And I'm like, were you having these thoughts like as you were writing the story, or were you having these thoughts like way back when you were like making DanMachi? Because I can't believe that he would think to end the series here with all the plot threads that he's opened up across the years. Like, I don't think that's a thought that occurred to him recently, but way more in the past. But it's very interesting to see that he wanted to originally end the story here with Ryu and Bell. Like, that gives me some slight hope for my ship wish. But in the past interview, Omori Sensei said that Volume 14 is pretty much the halfway point for the series, so a long way to go, almost 30 volumes. And he ends the afterwards saying that, to the folks at my publishing company, if they let me, I like to write about the elven heroine again at some point. And I'm like, yes, please write about Ryu again at some point. Like, that almost gives me that hope that we might see that volume of Ryu finding Estrella Familia and then joining Hestia Familia. Like, if we get a standalone volume on just that, that'd be really, really cool. But that's me fanboying about Ryu, my favorite character, and some people might get annoyed about all the attention that Ryu has been getting of late, but I will always be all for it. But yeah, guys, this was a very long spoiler discussion video. It warrants it because this is the longest volume in the series, but I can go on and on and on and on and on about DanMachi and this novel because of who is involved in it. But I hope you guys really enjoyed this volume. It was a great read, my favorite volume by far. Can't wait to see where it goes with Volume 15. Yen Press announced a date, but we got so much more DanMachi left to go. So in the comments below, just write out what were your favorite scenes in the novel, what you think is coming in the future. No spoilers, please, for people that are like reading summaries of future novels that aren't translated yet. I don't want to see any of that in the video, so please be respectful of the people that are staying to the official English releases, and let's have a great discussion about those. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you'd like to see more DanMachi content, please go ahead and like this video, subscribe to my channel, join my Discord, and follow me on Twitter. And as always, continue enjoying your time avenging Aurario and the dungeon. This is Lauren, your guild advisor, signing out.